Seasoned with Grace Unbox presents Tune Up Tuesdays. This live weekly event is here to provide you and your family with tools for stronger family relationships. And now, here are your hosts, Doctors Robert and Denise Davis.
Hello, friends. We're glad you've decided to join us. Welcome back to another week of Seasoned with Grace Unboxed Tune Up Tuesdays. Seasoned with Grace presents Tune Up Tuesdays to give viewers tools and strategies to tune up, to improve, and to enhance family relationships. We want to help you gain a better understanding of your family, as well as to equip you to improve family relationships. So let's get started.
Again, I want to thank each of you for joining us for Tune Up Tuesdays. For the past few weeks, we've discussed the beginning steps to improving your family relationships. Today, we're going to continue exploring the areas of emotional responses. Actually, this is going to be part 3 in exploring the areas of emotional responses. I believe that if we understand the origin of our emotions and how they are manifested in our relationships, we can work on them and ultimately develop stronger, healthier relationships. And let me unpack that a little bit more for me, Denise. Each of us respond to different emotions in different ways. For instance, I know people who use their fist when they get angry. I also know people who cry when they get angry. I know people who withdraw. Oh, you're a crier when you get angry.
Oh, yeah.
All right. I know people who withdraw when they get angry. So each individual has a different way that they respond to various emotions.
Right.
How a person responds, however, when they get angry has a lot to do with how their emotional computer has been programmed from their family system. But we're getting ahead of ourselves right now, so I want us to kind of slow down a little bit.
Okay.
Denise, do you mind doing a quick recap of the roadmap to healthy family relationships that we've been doing each week?
Sure. Okay, so we've been reading from Murray Bowens, Family Therapy in Clinical Practice, page 436. And it says, when any key member of a family can accurately observe what is going on in their family, as well as the part that they play in it, when they can control their own emotional responses, when they can avoid counterattacking when they're provoked, and when they can maintain an active relationship with other key members of the family without withdrawing, without emotionally checking out or becoming silent, the entire system will change in a series of predictable steps. This is the essence of producing change in your family's system. This is the method of coaching one person through the predictable functioning of their family system and supervising their efforts to modify their own functioning in all other relationships.
So far, we have learned 3 of the steps in the process of improving family relationships. First, we learned how to identify all the key members of our family. Yeah. And there actually is some steps that goes a little deeper than this because to really identify the key members of our family, we have to go back generations. But we began this process, and as we've learned, this is just a process. These are the people, when we talk about identifying the key members of our family, these are the people that have helped to shape and who have an impact on our emotional responses. The second thing that we've learned was some strategies to accurately observe what's going on within our families. And then third, we discuss how to observe the part that we play in our family functioning. The last time that we met was right around the Thanksgiving holiday, and so our homework assignment was to journal the following questions. What family situations causes the most emotional reactions in my life? Who are the family members that are usually involved in these situations? And the last question, of course, was what are the emotions I typically experience? And we said, list as many as possible. So when I go through these situations that evoke, certain emotions, what are those emotions that are evoked? And I wanted to list as many as possible.
Okay. So last week we discussed control your reaction. Today we're going to dive deeper into that, into this subject. For good or bad, certain people have a strong influence on how we function and respond emotionally. That is why listing our family members help us to be more aware of who influences us. And when I talked about listing family members and who had an impact on our emotional functioning, I even mean the ones who have passed away. So Robert, last week you put me on the spot. Now it's your time to take the heat.
Okay.
Okay, so looking over your life, Who would you say are four people who've had the greatest impact on how you function or respond emotionally to situations?
I would say the four people that have had the greatest impact on me would be number one, my mother. And I guess I won't list it in any kind of numerical order.
Right.
But I'll just simply say my mother, my paternal grandfather, my paternal grandmother, and I would probably say my older brother, Ronzo. So I had an oldest brother, Mark. He never lived in the home with us that I can remember. And then underneath him, about 8 or 9 years older than me, was my brother, Ronzo. So I think that he had a very serious impact, or a strong impact on how I respond emotionally.
Okay. Okay. I'm not done with you yet, though.
Oh, Lordy.
So you mentioned your paternal grandfather. What do you think are some of the emotional responses that you learned from him?
It was an awful lot because he was the really only male that had a strong influence in my life per se. As you know, as you already know, of course, and as those of you who are watching are about to learn, my father was an absentee father for the most part. I knew who he was. I've interacted with him, of course, but we did not have a strong relationship at any real time in my life. So he was he was absentee. And so my paternal grandfather, that is my father's father, was the male figure in my life. And one of the things that I'm thinking about is the way that he processed anger. With my grandfather, since we talked about anger a little while ago, I might as well just continue to follow up on it. One of the things about my grandfather was that he would bottle up a lot of his anger. My grandfather was a very good man, but he would bottle up a lot of his anger, and then certain situations would just set him off. Okay. And even as I look at myself, I notice that, especially out in the community and different things of that nature, I'm more inclined to control my emotions, to be more reserved, etc. But when I do get angry, I find myself exploding. And he was not a violent person, but it was more of a verbal explosion, more of a volume in the voice explosion. And he also had several reactions. So my grandfather had a heart condition that I believe was very much attributed to the fact that he would bottle up some of those angry emotions. So that's what I kind of notice as I look at him and as I look at myself that we have in common, and how. And I'm not saying that everything he has came off on me, but I can kind of see that parallel in my life.
You mentioned that he was a good person, but this is how he reacted to anger. Remember, we're talking about how we have automatically learned emotions. But it doesn't mean he's a bad guy. It just means this is how he responds.
And I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because sometimes we look at how various members of our family, function or behaviors that they have, and then we do label them as good or bad individuals. And the truth of the matter is, they're not good or bad. They just are in most cases. There are evil people in this world. We're not going to try to negate that. But for the most part, our family members are just our family members. And so, and the second part about that, as I'm thinking about it, is that they also were influenced. So if my grandfather was still alive, I'd be very interested in asking him, list the four individuals who had the greatest impact on how you function emotionally. And I think that'd be something good for me to hear from him. And then I'd be interested in saying, okay, well, what parallels do you see between the way that your father, his mother died when he was quite young, so perhaps his stepmother would have had on his life? I'm not sure. But that would be something I'd be very interested in asking him.
Okay.
All right, let me get out of the hot seat for a moment. Seriously, those were two very good questions that you just asked, because if I'm going to understand my emotional responses, it definitely helps to be able to identify who and where I picked it up from. However, let's be real. Knowing who influenced or who helped shape the way that you respond emotionally is just the first step. The first step in a beautiful, lifelong journey. And that's what it is. It is a lifelong journey that we're going through. There is more to this process, but this is an essential step in the process. And I've noticed something, that civilizations, the Chronicles of the Kings, whether it's in the Bible or whether it's, the Ming Dynasty or whatever, Civilizations go through painstaking efforts to keep good chronicles of family histories. And one of the most important people in the African community is the griot, someone who was able to memorize and to repeat the family and the oral history of an entire village, of an entire community, of an entire tribe or nation, whatever you want to call it. And so we're not trying to blame our parents or previous generations for what we do. What we're trying to do, however, is to become more self-aware.
Right.
And I mentioned that with my grandfather. He had influences on his life, and then we stop with them, we go backwards, and his father's father had an influence on his life. His father's father was born a slave. And so, these things these things have a very profound impact on us. We're not trying to blame anyone, and we're also not trying to make excuses for what we do. What we're actually trying to do, and I think you mentioned this a moment ago, what we're actually trying to do is to become more self-aware.
Very good. So this sounds very much like an expansion of what I said last week. So remember, I was saying that once I become aware of how I function in my family system, once I come to terms with the emotions that arise during certain situations, I can begin to change the way I function and choose to respond more constructively. I guess today we can add that to the list by saying, once I know who shaped my automatic emotional responses and how I respond automatically, my responses don't have to be automatic.
So once you know how you respond automatically and what shaped it, then you don't have to respond as automatic.
Right. I become self-aware.
Oh.
My responses don't have to be dictated by history, by ancestry, or another force outside of my control. I can take control of my emotions and emotional responses. So in short, being more self-aware helps me take more control of my own emotions, my choices, and my life. I can begin to change the way I function and choose to respond more constructively.
And this is actually, as you bring that up, this is actually where family change takes place. When we take responsibility for our actions, our behaviors, and our emotional responses, what we're trying to do is to become more self-aware. Because the reality of the matter is, the only person that I can change is me. The only person that I can be in control of is me. Matter of fact, and I'm not sure who said it, so many iterations of it, but when people have no self-control, they try to control others.
Right.
And I know I'm probably butchering it, the idiom, but people who don't have self-control end up trying to control others. So what we're actually trying to do is to become more self-aware. When and the emphasis is on when I can accurately observe what's going on in my family, when I can accurately observe the part that I play in my family's functioning, when I can control my own emotional reactions, when to build off of what you mentioned at the beginning of our time here, when I can avoid counterattacking when I'm provoked. This is, so now the onus is on me. How can I become more intentional about taking control of my life? Because as I said a moment ago, and it bears repeating, the only person that I can change, the only person that I can modify, the only person that I can control, or even should want to control, should want to try to change, is myself.
Yes. So, Robert, let me give our viewers even more hope and encouragement. If you're taking time out of your busy schedule to watch Tune Up Tuesdays and are actually doing some of the homework assignments, if you're taking the first steps towards emotional health, emotional maturity, and self-differentiation. This is moving from being tossed around by the circumstances of life to having control of yourself. Wow, Robert, this was a great show. We're done already. So what's our homework for next week?
Okay, here's our homework for next week. In your journal, go back to the list of key members of your family that influenced your life. I want you to do what Denise had me to do a moment ago. I want you in your journal to go back to the key members of your family that influenced your life. And to the best of your ability, I want you to answer the following questions. Number one, how do or did they respond to the following emotions? anger, stress, loneliness, fear, depression, grief, etc. List
Just think of some other emotions.
Think of other emotions. And think also good emotions. I think a lot of those were negative. How do they respond to joy, and how do they respond to good news or things of that nature? And then I want to share this. How do you respond to the following emotions, such as anger, stress, loneliness, fear, depression, grief, joy, elation, etc.? And then the third question I want you to answer is, what emotional responses would you most like to change? So again, your homework assignment is in your journal. Go back and go back to the key members of your family that influenced your life, and to the best of your ability, answer the questions. How did or do they respond to the following emotions? Anger, stress, loneliness, fear, depression, and grief, etc. How do you respond to the following emotions? Anger, stress, loneliness, fear, depression, grief, etc. And what emotional responses would you most like to change?
Okay, so you don't want them to draw a parallel between key members of their family and how they respond?
No.
Okay.
No, just we're gonna keep it simple. We've been putting some heavy stuff on us. We're gonna keep it simple. Make it as simple as we can this go around.
Okay. So, well, friends, that's the time that we have for now. We'll be back here next week at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Tune Up Tuesdays, because even the smoothest running families need a Tune Up Tuesday. See you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you for watching Tune Up Tuesday. You can connect with us on Facebook or check out our website at swg-unboxed.org. That's swg-unboxed.org. Again, thank you for watching, and tune in next Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for another insightful episode of Tune Up Tuesday. Seasoned with Grace Unboxed also provides healthy relationship training and leadership development for businesses, churches, and community organizations. For a free consultation to discuss your team's needs, please contact us at our website at swg-unboxed.org. That's swg-unboxed.org.